What's going on, everyone? We are back here for episode number 2 of Business Bites, your podcast that's going to help your food and restaurant business scale and grow in this digital landscape. Brought to you today by the Level Up Group, our marketing agency. And today I'm super excited and honored to be sitting down with my very good friend, Paul Tran. Paul is a legend in the restaurant space. Not only has he had success in his own concepts, but also had success scaling other franchises and being able to help franchises find success in this crowded current economy that we have with the franchise space. Paul's been able to work with brands such as Five Guys, Halal Guys. He actually owns 9 locations of the Halal Guys, which Paul will talk about in this episode. But Paul has had so much success helping individuals just like yourself take a restaurant idea or concept and turn it into a flourishing franchise. And we're going to get into this as a 3-part interview with him. Each one is going to talk about different aspects. This first one, we're going to really get to know Paul's background and what led him into the franchise space. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. And if you got anything out of it, make sure you like and subscribe this episode, leave us a review, and share it with anyone that might find value in this episode. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? I'm super fired up to have our first interview for Business Bites, and I've got my very good friend, Paul Tran, the absolute legend, not just in food, but in life, man. I appreciate you, Paul, for being the first guest and hopping on here and being willing to share value with the community and provide some insights into what's helped you become successful in the food industry and helped tons of other people have success in franchises as well as just the food space.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I'm super honored because you're so well connected, and I love everyone that you've talked to and interviewed in the past. So just to know that I'm being considered, as well as just being the first, honored, man.
This is actually the first time that we've done a podcast together, correct?
We've talked about it for quite some time.
We did some Level Up Society stuff back in the day, but this is the first time that we've done the podcast. I think, on the previous podcast I had, I think we had talked about doing an in-person one, and that just never came to fruition. But now we're making it happen. So I really appreciate you, man, for hopping on here. It's long overdue.
I'm glad to be here, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Now we just need to keep our Dave Chappelle jokes to the DMs and keep the podcast professional today. No, I'm just kidding. We're both huge Dave Chappelle fans, and,
Yes.
and we always have some good conversations around that. So keep your feet off my couch. Anyways, well, Paul, before we get into it, I know we talked before we hit record. We don't want to go too much into the background because we want to get in the meat and the potatoes and give everybody what they came here for. But just to give people context, share a little bit about who you are and your journey into the food space.
Yeah, for sure. So I am a multi-unit restaurant owner. I own the franchise rights for the Halal Guys here in Southern California. Me and a couple partners, we own 9 stores. We used to own 11, lost 2 in the pandemic. That's probably some stories, some business bites there for you. We do about anywhere from 15 to 20 million a year in sales. In addition to that, and zooming out, I also advise restaurant owners on franchise growth. I've had a pretty colorful career and helped sell over 1,000 franchise units. I've also helped a couple of restaurants go public on the stock exchange as well as get acquired, and all sorts of other milestones in between. Fun fact, I still don't know how to cook. And the reason why we're successful is because I'm not in the restaurant. I just advise on franchise growth, building systems, how to think about scale versus just being a really good day-to-day operator. And I do a bunch of other things as well, but that's pretty much the main gist before you go down the rabbit hole.
I love that you hit on I still don't know how to cook. I mean, it was the same concept with me with GoFresh. Like, I remember our first article was incompetence in the kitchen leads to business idea.
Yes.
Because I jokingly said I can't cook rice. I burn water. I was joking about it, but she took it and ran with it. But I think it's a great point because a lot of people do feel like I need to be a chef. I need to really be, formally trained or have tons of experience to open a restaurant concept. And I think it's quite the opposite. Some of the most successful food franchises I've seen or food chains that I've seen have been people that aren't chefs. And often the person that is the chef doesn't understand the business side and doesn't do as well as the person that doesn't know how to cook.
Yeah, two thoughts about that. I mean, I don't want to pretend like I was just genius in the making in the beginning. It's always a bunch of mistakes, but I encourage everyone to go on YouTube and look up, I guess, this one interview back in the 80s when someone stood up and berated like Steve Jobs because he knows jack shit about like design and engineering. Sorry, doesn't know anything about engineering. And he's like, why would I need to know about engineering if I know exactly what customers need and I build an amazing team around me to do it? So when I heard that, I was like, that I validated my ignorance there. And the second thing is like, I mean, building a business like Go Fresh or any restaurant, like making food is only like 10% at most of the business. There's so much else involved. So if you're too focused on being good at cooking, then you pretty much aren't, you're neglecting the other 90%. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. I think what you said about Steve Jobs is so important because it's not about the food, it's about understanding your customers. And I think too many people are like, but I have the best food, or we have the coolest concept, or but like, does it fit the market that you're
Yeah.
in? Does it actually serve the want of the customers? And and I see this with people how they view even Yelp responses. Oh, that guy doesn't understand what a medium rare steak is. It's like, yeah, but you've had 10 reviews that say you're overcooking your medium rare steaks. Like,
Yeah.
maybe
All
you
that
don't
bragging.
understand what your customer, you know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of this, like, I'm better than my customer, but you have to understand that it's about understanding your customer and delivering it what they actually want and need.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, all that stuff that you're saying, like my stuff is good, blah blah blah. That's about you. It's not
Yeah.
about the customer, unfortunately. And plenty of people who are not doing anything meaningful in their life, and they're super smart though.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a lot of people that are too smart for their own good,
Yeah,
and they're too focused on their training, their experiences, and I think really creating a great concept. And you've worked with some incredible concepts. It was really customer focused first, getting the feedback. I love the feedback loop that you get from customers, but you have to be willing to open your ears and hear them.
yeah. I think
So
it's hard because sometimes you do need to discern between whether this is actual feedback or these are just customers that you're not meant to serve and you need to move
yeah,
on. So that's the trick. The trick is figuring out
yeah.
which one is which.
Yeah. So with all that being said, let's take a step back. So how did you get into the food space? Not being somebody that knows how to cook, what led you into there? Because I always think that's an interesting origin story. Like, what made you decide to get into food of all industries?
Uh, they always say like you shouldn't spend too much time reading business books because a lot of times it's all this wisdom that happened after the fact. Like now they know how to do it, but if you knew too much ahead of time, you won't take any action. Early on, it's just pure ignorance, and I think it's, to be honest, a little bit of ego stroking as well. There was just a restaurant that was in my neighborhood that served Cajun seafood, like Louisiana style seafood. Like they rolled out the parchment paper on the tables and like they boiled crawfish from Louisiana and dumped it on the table, and people would just get their hands dirty and peel shrimp and peel crawfish. I loved it, and at the time there was just nothing like it in my neighborhood. But because they were the only game in town, people were just waiting 2 3 hours for a spot. Even on Tuesday, which is supposed to be like the least busiest time for restaurants. So in my head, I just had this brilliant idea that like, hey, like, what if we just opened one more restaurant just like that? I don't care if it's shitty, but if it's for people who, I'm pretty sure there's people not willing to wait 2 3 hours if they knew that there
Yeah.
was another option. In retrospect, and in college lectures, it means the supply demand gap, right? I didn't know that shit at the time, but and I just another thought was the ignorance of like, hey, how hard can it be? And the third thing was, I have some of this student loan money. Like this is the right way to blow it. And so yeah, I just asked a couple friends who knew how to cook, not by professional trade, but just because they knew how to cook and they loved it, and people that I trusted, and we just, you know, there's a million other lessons to share, but that's pretty much how we got into it.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so with that concept, I mean, I know the outcome, but want to share with everybody what ultimately happened with that concept. And then from that, how did it lead into where you're at now, into the halal guys, as well as working with so many restaurants?
Yeah, and I don't mean to breeze over all the like million stupid mistakes I made in the restaurant because that's a masterclass on its own. But yeah, that could be another podcast another time because I don't want to encourage. I don't want people to think that. there's no mistakes and everything was
Yeah.
perfect. But even despite a series of mistakes, I mean, we ran it for 3 years. It ran really successfully. We did about anywhere from 800 to 900,000 a year, and we pulled out about 30% of it in
Oh,
profits. By the second year, we started getting franchise requests and inquiries, and I had no idea how to do it. And so that was what set me on the path to learn how to franchise. But by the third year, we got a private investor interested in buying our stores. And so at the time, we were still young. My other buddies, they wanted to go to film school. Another one went to engineering school. This was just like a hobby. And so we
yeah.
decided to sell while it was hot, and we sold for 3 times our investment. And thank goodness, because we're not brilliant or anything, but that was at the mid 2008, and that's when the economy
Wow.
took a shit. So we dodged
Yeah.
the biggest bullet ever, and again, that also planted a seed in my head to just learn how to franchise, and that set me on the path for my career.
Wow.
Yeah,
I love it. And timing. I mean, to get
timing.
out before the crash. Wow. I mean, whew, that's a nice relief.
Thank goodness I was greedy and
Yeah.
wanted money, because that helped me to avoid the 2008 meltdown.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
It's amazing how everything works out, right? And ultimately, it did lead into this next chapter of franchising, which is
Sure.
a lot what I want to dive into.